You know, there are some really great graphic novels out there. Just to name a few. We've got Alan Moore's V for Vendetta and Watchmen. Then there's Frank Miller's Sin City, Preacher by Garth Ennis. And of course you cannot forget about Neil Gaiman's Sandman. And we've got one of my personal favorites, which is Jason Aaron's Sculpt, which I think will be adapted into a TV series or a movie someday in the future. James O Barr's The Crow must be mentioned here as well. Some of these stories have already been adapted, like Sin City, which has been the perfect adaptation of the source material. And I really enjoyed the Preacher TV series, even though it wasn't even remotely as good as the comics. And like I've mentioned already, I'm still waiting for that Sculpt adaptation. There are a few more titles worth mentioning when we speak about good comic adaptations. And one of them is for sure The Crow. And for today's video we need to take a look at good and bad remakes as well. I think there are great examples of outstanding remakes, or let's even call it reinterpretations. Like, for example, Peter Jackson's King Kong, John Carpenter's The Thing, David Cronenberg's The Fly, or even Planet of the Apes. And yes, I really love the Evil Dead remake. Of course, there are pretty bad examples as well. Martyrs, Oldboy, or The Ghost in the Shell. But not a single one of them is as bad as the 2024 adaptation of The Crow. I mean, I just watched this movie a few weeks ago and I already forgot most about the characters.
Wow, well that's something.
And it happens to be that this is an adaptation and a remake at the same time. So today we've got to talk about the worst movie I watched in 2024. And I really don't like talking bad about things people put their passion into. And that is why we start with something positive. Like talking about one of the greatest graphic novels ever. So let's talk about James O Barr's The Crow. I've got a great place to recommend to you. Walt's Comic Shop, the greatest European store for graphic novels, manga and comic books. They've got a huge selection over there, making it possible for European citizens to get your hands on your favorite books. And with the code Cosmic Comic Corner, you will receive free shipping for your first order above 40 euros. If you are into graphic novels that don't just tug at your heartstrings, but rip them out, stomp on them and set them ablaze, James O Barr's The Crow is your jam. And I think the greatest pieces of art are always created out of suffering. And this one is born out of O Barr's own grief after losing his fiancée, who has been killed by a drunk driver.
And she was like the exact opposite of me. I was, dark and brooding and sarcastic and really venomous and everything. And she was just like this bright white light.
Based on his fiancée Beverly, he created Shelley.
Kind of tried to capture her innocence and that kind of white light quality that I saw.
Eric reflected himself, or at least he reflected his feelings. In an interview he stated that he never felt comfortable drawing himself, so he gave Eric the physique of Iggy Pop, while the face was that of Peter Murphy. After his loss, he joined the Marines. During the 80s, he was stationed in West Berlin and he illustrated combat manuals for the US military. While living in West Berlin in 1981, he started to work on The Crow, and it took him about 9 years to finish the story. It was a means of dealing with his personal tragedy.
I finally realized that I was going to have to channel all this into something or I was going to self-destruct. So I decided, well, I'll find this vehicle, which was The Crow, to vent all this anger and frustration and rage. So it became my therapy for a long time.
In an interview he stated, "As I drew each page, it made me more self-destructive. If anything, there's pure anger on each page." And I think if you have a look at the graphic novel for the first time, you will really feel what he meant back then. It's one of those books you won't put down until you've finished it. Sure, on the surface it's about a guy who comes back from the dead to avenge his murder and his fiance's brutal death. But dig a little deeper and you'll find a story that's equal parts heartbreaking and soul-stirring. And I can tell you, when I read this comic for the first time, I didn't know anything about its background. But I felt like this was raw emotion put on paper. Sometimes you can't just tell if something's real. What makes The Crow definitely stand out is its artistry.
I never had any formal art training at all. Everything was kind of self-taught. I learned my anatomy not from comic books. I actually learned to draw from like Michelangelo's statues, classic sculpture, paintings from that era.
O Barr's stark black and white illustrations perfectly capture the desolation and rage that define Eric's journey. The visuals are gritty, haunting, and achingly beautiful. It's not just about cool fight scenes, it's more about the quiet moments, the introspection. And when you read this, you will actually feel that the main protagonist is nothing but a reflection of the feelings and suffering of the author. You can just tell. So, The Crow isn't just a revenge tale, it's a lament, a love letter to the people we've lost and the length we'd go to for them. It feels like a dark poetic tale, a narrative that rock and heavy metal songs want to be about. And because it feels so real, it's so easy to get lost in this story. This comic book is actually painful to read because it's so introspective. And when you have a look at the author's childhood, it does even make more sense.
Up until I was like 16, I kind of felt like my life was this endurance test that I had to get through. It was like, what more could be thrown at me? I kind of felt like God had his elbow on my neck my whole life. My birth mother was so drunken out of it that she couldn't remember exactly when I was born. It was between Christmas and New Year's, she said, so they made my birthday January 1st. I'm the New Year's hope.
This guy was raised in foster care, which is not a great way to start life.
When I was a kid, I used to play this game in the bathtub where I would try and keep all the water on one side of the bathtub, which is pretty much impossible. It just can't be done. But it was a game I would play, and I kind of felt like, that's what I was doing in my life. I was just trying to keep everything bad and evil and everything that would destroy me back. And you can only do that for so long before you tire and you realize it's futile. There's no way you're going to be able to do that forever. It's never going to relent. It's never going to stop.
The Crow was adapted into a movie in 1994. It wasn't a direct copy of the graphic novel, but it stood true to its source material, even though it changed a lot of the characters. Look, I've been a fan of the movie even long before I ever read the comic. And I still love the movie to this day, but the comic itself hit me in the face, harder than the movie ever could. And once again, that is even without knowing anything about the background. Brandon Lee delivered a legendary performance. He understood the source material, and everything he does on screen feels real, which makes his death during filming even more tragic, especially since he became friends with O Barr during the process. Brandon Lee became Eric, a broken soul with a poetic heart and a sharp edge. The film combined gothic visuals, a killer soundtrack, and a sense of dark romance that made it one of the most iconic films of the 90s. On top of that, it spawned 3 sequels and a TV series, and I really don't want to talk much about either of those. But I feel the urge to talk about the 2024 adaptation of The Crow. After seeing the trailer a while ago, I thought yeah, this is not for me. But I was curious and I wondered, can it really be as bad as they say? And yes, in fact, it turned out to be far worse. They just ripped the heart out of the story. I'm actually not sure if they even tried to create a good movie or if they just wanted to cash in. While the 1994 adaptation did some things different than the comic, the 2024 version just takes the characters and a few things and tries to create its own vision of Eric and Shelley. And it's awful. It makes you realize that it is always best to stay with the source material. What's with the character design? I mean, it's like a mix between Machine Gun Kelly and the Island Boys. And look, I really like Skarsgård, especially in it. He absolutely nailed that performance. But his version of Eric was really stale and redundant. In fact, every character in this film seems to be on some medication. It feels like Xanax the movie.
Are we having fun or what?
No, we are not having fun. You're not even remotely invested in these characters. How could you? They don't even feel like real human beings. And why do you take a character like Eric, who's based on a 90s heavy metal and gothic aesthetic, and make him look like a decalcomania picture of a juvenile social media presence?
Well, boy, your mama must be damn proud of you.
I just don't get it. I mean, at that point you could have just made any movie. You didn't need to attach it to an existing franchise. But let's talk about the story. What I can recall is that you've got this guy and you've got this girl, and they meet within a mental institution. Both characters seem to have emotional problems, and I guess that is just a sort of romance nowadays. Anyway, both are getting killed because of something the girl did. But instead of going straight to hell or straight to heaven, the guy arrives at a train station. And this is a common movie trope. The thing is, we've seen it so many times. It's just not creative anymore. Anyway, he made a deal and traded his soul for the girl's soul. He becomes the vigilante and kills the demonic overlord, which is basically the overlord vampire from 30 Days of Night. Again. And that is the greatest problem of the film. You just don't feel anything for any of these characters. And maybe it's because I'm too old and I just don't understand movies like this. Or maybe the mistake is that you watch this movie while knowing the original movie from 1994 or even the source material. But even if you look at it from a neutral standpoint, this film is just not entertaining. Both of the characters hadn't any purpose in life other than taking drugs and just living life day by day. Everything seems so contemporary and so cool. Everything within this movie screams juvenile. And that is something I have a problem with these days. Don't get me wrong, I know what it means to be an edgy teenager. I was there in the late 90s. But I feel like that even the edgiest stuff of that time still tried to convey some morals. At least The Crow did. I mean, let's just compare some of the dialogue.
Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children.
So, the original Eric came back from the dead to avenge his and his girlfriend's death. But still, he takes the time to pull a mother out of her addiction, while making her realize her worth in this world.
Your daughter is out there on the streets waiting for you.
He's trying to save a cop from lung cancer.
You shouldn't smoke these. They'll kill you.
And he's there for this little girl.
I wish the rain would stop just once.
It can't rain all the time.
Now let's have a look at the 2024 version.
I like your tattoo.
Thanks.
And you can't really expect much more.
What kind of tea is hard to drink?
I don't know.
Reality.
Yep, especially the reality of this movie. And it's kind of sad really, because right at the beginning they quote the comic and I thought, yeah, okay, this could be better than I expected.
When someone you love dies, you will know emptiness. You will know what it is to be completely and utterly alone. You will never forget, and you will never, ever forgive.
That was a nice nod to the comic. But for real, to be fair, the movie had a lot of good shots. It's just not enough to make it entertaining. If you really want to experience The Crow, go to its source. There's a raw, unfiltered power in James O Barr's pages that no film, not even the 1994 classic, can fully replicate. The comic pulls you into Eric's world with an intimacy that only the written word and hand-drawn art can achieve. It's a meditation on love, loss, and what it means to carry on in the face of unspeakable pain. The comic is the purest distillation of that story. The 1994 movie is a stunning homage to it. And the 2024 remake, well, let's just say it's there if you're curious. Now I'd really like to know your opinion on the graphic novel, the 1994 adaptation, maybe even the sequels and the TV series, and the 2024 movie. That's it for today, and I'll see you next time.